Imam Raza. You have a very much longer name, but we're going to stick with you, allowing you to introduce yourself. This is North Tyneside, RE Network, primary in the main. Really committed teachers spend so much of their time worrying about their RE and doing really good delivery. We're very fortunate in the group that we have, very curious about their subject. We are inviting you tonight to introduce yourself and to tell us about your faith from a personal perspective, anything that you think that these teachers should know so they could support Muslim students or teach about Islam. And hopefully we'll encourage teachers to pop things into the chat all the time. If teachers feel they'd like some more support or information on how they actually deliver this in the classroom, then please do chuck those things into the chat as well, because Raza is a very experienced person at working with young people, so it would be good for him to be able to be challenged. And I can help out if he's not able to put his head into that space while he's talking. Okay, so Raza, over to you.
Right, well, thank you very much, Karenza, for inviting me here today to speak with the RE teachers about myself and my faith and obviously Islam in general. So thank you very much for the invitation. So first and foremost, what I would say is what you are about to hear may be different to what you've read on Islam, especially in the context of teaching about it to students, or maybe watching anything related to Islam on social media, on TV, etc. So what I'm about to talk about in terms of my faith or my journey, who I am, etc., is going to be, I hope, an eye-opening experience for everyone in relation to exploring Muslims and Islam in general. So a bit about myself. I grew up in North Shields in the 80s. I went to a Sunday church school. Sunday church school. At school, people thought I was Hindu because of my dark skin, but at church, people didn't understand why I was there. In fact, the priest said to me, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I don't know. I think I'm at the mosque." And he said, "No, it's a church." I went home. I said to my mom, I'm not sure where I'm going on a Sunday. She followed me and said, "Son, this is not a mosque, this is a church. You've been going to church for the past 4 or 5 years." So there afterwards, my mother thought, you know what, the fact that at school they think you're a Hindu, at church they think you're something else. And in fact, the first person to teach you about Islam was the local priest when you wanted some wine, and he said you could not drink wine because it's not allowed in your religion. Therefore, my mother thought, well, let me just send you to a boarding school, an Islamic boarding school based in Worcestershire from the age of 9. And I basically was there for the next 10, 12 years, studying Islam in terms of its theological foundations to its practical implications in life, and learning several languages, including Arabic, etc. And after graduating as an Imam or as an Islamic scholar from the Islamic seminary based in Worcestershire, I then became an Imam for several years, 10 or 12 years, in Newcastle in one of the mosques. There, I sort of practiced my faith, leading the community on faith matters, became heavily involved in interfaith, traveling locally and internationally with interfaith partners, learning about myself as much as I was learning about other people, became involved in the local universities as a chaplain, as well as acute hospitals. And then I transferred from all of that to now to my current role as a mental health chaplain for Cumbria, Northumberland, Tyne and Wear Healthcare Foundation Trust, which is basically the second largest trust in the UK, which covers the entire Northeast from Cumbria all the way to Middlesbrough. That's me in a nutshell. I'm not sure how big of a nutshell that was, but that's just me. Besides that, I'm involved in many other projects. I deliver food banks on a weekend. I'm into my writing. I've got several books, hopefully to be published on Islam and other aspects of my life in various ways as well. Given the fact that I've just told you a bit about myself in a couple of words, I would say, I am now going to talk about Islam. And what I'm about to say may make you rethink Islam compared to what you may have known about it before. So have a think about what I'm about to say, and understand where I am coming from, if possible, in terms of what Islam is. So Islam is a spiritual tradition that maintains a tie between human beings and God throughout life and death through spiritual allegiance. This form of allegiance is thereafter enhanced through a treasure of intellectual, spiritual, and social frameworks, the purpose of which is to cleanse the human heart of negativity and darkness, and to fill it with positivity and light. Therefore, Islam could arguably be classed as a faith, a religion, or a spiritual tradition, depending on each devotee of God and their spiritual journey towards Him. Therefore, not all adherents of Islam are on the same spiritual path or journey, and each human being receives internal spiritual nourishment in accordance with their level of spiritual desire in life. Now, by the way, that's the first paragraph of my upcoming book. So, you know, I've blessed this meeting with that. But that in itself, if anyone was to say to me, what is Islam? That is, to me, is what Islam is all about. It's basically a term given to a sense of relationship that one has with God through spirituality. And each person's spiritual level is different in accordance with the highs and lows of life, and in every particular way in life. So that's Islam. Now, if we can understand Islam in that context, then the 5 pillars of Islam, which we come to know of in terms of prayer, charity, testimony to faith, fasting in Ramadan, and the pilgrimage, these things accommodate and facilitate that spiritual journey to God for Muslims. Therefore, anyone who adheres to Islam in the context that I've just described through the 5 pillars of Islam are known as Muslims. So a Muslim is one who adheres to Islam through a spiritual allegiance towards God through the 5 practical pillars. So that is why, in my view, when you have Muslim children in school and you come across Muslim children, not every child will be the same. Not every parent will be the same. Some are migrants, some are born in this country. Their methodologies around their faith will be different, will be either underpinned by cultural values or spiritual values or even religious values as well, and sometimes a combination of all 3. And the reason why I say that is because Muslims are not a homogenous group. Muslims are very diverse. They come from all different backgrounds. You have particular traditions within Islam which may focus on a literalist approach to Islam. Some are more spiritual, some are more hereditary, some are more cultural. And I think it's important to understand that, because when you look at the Christian tradition, for example, there are various groups and methodologies and theological sort of understandings within the Christian tradition, within the Judaic tradition, within other faith traditions. Similarly, Islam is no less. And Islam itself, in terms of Muslims, they come from a whole range of different backgrounds. So in diversifying our understanding of Islam and Muslims, we will then begin to appreciate the diversification of Muslim, I was going to say patients, of Muslim children coming into schools in order to learn and be part of schools itself. And in doing so, we can then appreciate the richness, and I say this, the richness of cultural diversity that parents bring into school as a result of their participation within schools as well. So, and of course, me saying that it's easy, but sometimes practically speaking, that can be hard, because you can have language barriers, you can have cultural barriers, You can have people who don't feel safe or don't feel welcome or don't feel like they are part of British society because of their, let's be honest about it, potentially their struggles in life, the migrational factor stemming from their home sort of country to this country. And sometimes, and I'm not sure if anyone's come across this or not, there may be differences between migrant parents and first or second generation born Muslims in the UK. So sometimes you may say something to a particular Muslim child, however, the parent may not necessarily agree with that because they may have their cultural views rooted from their particular background that they've come from. And this child wants a combination of everything in life, British values, Islamic values, etc. And yet there's a what I would call a cultural dichotomy taking place. In other words, in school, they are as free as they can be in terms of the breadth of richness of all different types of cultures. But when they come home, it may be just one path, or there may be just one window of expression at home. In other words, you come home, you got to pray, you got to eat, you got to read the Quran, you've got to listen to your mom and dad, you got to cook, you know, you got to do all of that. But in school, they may not necessarily have that, or even if they did have some sort of discipline, it's done in a way that they respect teachers and the education establishments that they're in as well. So therefore, I would say from my experience in helping schools and helping parents, Muslim children, and even teachers to understand a bit more about the Muslim communities, I would say that coordinating roles, so you could have Muslim coordinating roles or Muslim parent coordinating roles, etc. These are really, really important to have so that their form of engagement is developed, not because only the kids coming to school, but there's a development taking place between their parents as well, or their guardians as well, and their communities as well. You see, I have come across some Muslim parents who think, oh, my kid is going to school, and they take for granted the fact that, oh, my kid's going to school, but when they come back, you're in a different world now. You're in our world, or you're in our cultural denomination. And I've said to some parents, no, you know, they're in the UK. There is a breadth of cultural diversity here. They need to experience it all. They need to understand it. They need to enrich themselves through diversification within society, within communities as well. But not all parents will understand that. Not all parents will try and align themselves with that. Here's another thing I would say. I don't think it's enough, and I say this critically, by the way, I don't think it's enough to have an interpreter at school only when it comes to trying to understand what parents may say in relation to their children. I think we need to go more than that. I think we need to understand not just the language that people speak of, but also their culture as well, their cultural values as well. You know, where are their opinions coming from? Okay. Are they comfortable with their kids coming to school? How do they view you and I as educational facilitators? You know, what form of engagement can we make to ensure that Muslim kids are safe at school, despite a lot of the Islamophobia that is taking place in this day and age, where people are being killed as a result of being Muslim? You know, so I feel like once you scratch the surface, there's a whole range of work that can be done if we go the extra mile. You know, so we all have a responsibility in not just educating our Muslim pupils, but also ensuring that their safety is paramount in terms of when they come to school, and that their parents have full confidence in ourselves as education facilitators in the safety of their children, etc. as well. On the flip side, I have come across some schools in the Northeast where some head teachers have called me and they are afraid of certain students who have never prayed before, but now want to pray. A girl has never worn the hijab before, but now wants to wear the hijab. And some school teachers have said to me, they feel that is a form of extremism. And I have argued against that, because to me, that's not extremism. That's just someone quite simply wanting to practice their faith. It's not under duress. It's not something that they've been forced with. It's something that they just want to practice and to basically find out what it's all about. So I think we need to be very careful in terms of the terminology that we use when we see the variations of spiritual journeys that some Muslim some Muslim peoples may undertake when it comes to schooling. Not all people are extreme. The hijab is not, for example, the hijab is not an extreme identity. Having a beard is not an extreme identity. Praying 5 times a day is not an extreme identity, you know. But if we appreciate, like I said in my introduction, Islam to be from a spiritual foundation, and therefore each spiritual journey differs in accordance with the level of spiritual desire, then I think we can appreciate our Muslim peoples and their parents and the cultural richness that they come with as well.
That's a really good introduction to the diversity within Islam, Raza, and a passionate plea for understanding of the difference in the families. If you're a teacher in a school without any Muslim students at all, but you've got a curriculum to deliver, how would you guide us through, for example, the 5 pillars, but getting underneath some of the black and white or cartoon portrayal of what they are? Could you give us a whiz through those?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a whiz tour of the 5 pillars of Islam like never before, okay?
And if any teachers have other questions about other curriculum areas, get them in that box now so that Raza can address them. Otherwise, he'll be on 5 pillars from now to the end, because this is the subject of his new book. So if you want something different, get it in the box.
Okay, so let's go to the 5 pillars of Islam. The first pillar, and by the way, what I'm going to do is, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell you what you normally read in books, but I'm going to tell you otherwise. So give you a variation, basically, okay? So the books will tell you Shahada is the first pillar of Islam, which means to testify that there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. That's all they say. My view is Shahada is the condition of the human soul when it manifests through the grace of God, through spiritual allegiance. So in other words, when the first pillar of Islam, Shahada, is basically a feeling, a process of manifesting God in one's life through spiritual allegiance. In other words, through spiritual prosperity, meaning once someone seeks the meaning of life, they go out into the nature, you know, they travel the world and they feel like, gosh, there's something more than life. There's something more than just me. There's something more than where I live. There's something more than the stars above us, okay? That in itself basically is testifying to the greatness of God throughout the universe and beyond. So that's basically what Shahada is in a deeper sense, at the heart of the matter, okay? Because testify could mean various things. It could mean, oh, I just say that I believe in God and that's it. Even a lot of Muslims believe in that. But my point, my argument is it's more than that. It's the continuation of one's spiritual manifestation of God throughout life in every single way. Every time I go and travel abroad, every time I go and see people, I am enhanced to the diversity of God's creation, and I appreciate the colors of God in every single way. That's Shahada. Okay, right. So the next pillar of Islam is called Salah. So Shahada, by the way, the word Shahada means to testify or testification or manifestation. That's what it means, translating from Arabic to English. The next pillar of Islam, which is Salah. Salah basically means, believe it or not, it means pillar. It means stick. It means pillar. It means boundary. That's what Salah means, okay? Now, your textbook, the normal textbook that you find in W.H. Smith, etc., will tell you that Salah is 5 daily prayers and all Muslims should pray 5 times a day. What I say is Salah is the condition of the human soul when it is humble and full of humility in connecting with God at every moment of one's life, whether or not they pray 5 times a day or not. And the 5 times a day aspect is the boost that one needs in order to enhance their association with God through spiritual allegiance. So 5 periods of godly mindfulness throughout the day and night. But besides that, salah is the condition of the humble human soul when it's connected with God. And the 5 daily prayers makes you even more humble, makes you even more full of humility in relation to your association with God and with people. Why do I say with people? And you won't find this in books, because the Quran, which is basically a network of spiritual pathways towards God as in terms of guidance, etc. The Quran clearly states that the benefits of prayer isn't just quite simply praying to God, but the benefit of prayer is to cleanse the human heart of negativity. And by enhancing it, it enhances one's relationship, not just with God, but with human beings in general. Because humility compared to arrogance can do much more in terms of building bridges and building relationships. And therefore, that's why Salah is not just about 5 daily prayers. It's much more than that. So that's Salah. The next pillar is Zakah. The word Zakah or Zakat basically means purification. It also means redemption. Okay, so in your textbooks, you will find Zakah is the annual sort of alms-giving, sort of charitable sort of process that Muslims give to the poor if they can afford it. Approximately 2.5% of annual savings, if they can afford it. Zakah, in my view, is much more than that. Zakah is basically purifying your relationship with materialism in the world. So by giving away your wealth, you're purifying your relationship with wealth to say that this wealth isn't mine. This wealth is a gift by God for me to give to others and to myself. That is what zakah is. And zakah is not restricted to monetary charity. The greatest form of zakah, in my view, is the gift of humanity. And therefore, the Quran clearly states that the idea of charity isn't just giving money. It's even charitable in Islam to smile and to be pleasant with your fellow human being. So charity is much more encompassing than just 2.5% of your annual savings. And therefore, the more one is charitable as a Muslim within Islam, the more their relationship with the world becomes even more beautified through the purification of one's relationship with materialism, and therefore replaced by enhancement in spirituality. So that's zakah. The fourth pillar of Islam is termed Sawm or Siyam, which basically means fasting. Okay, the word Sawm or Siyam doesn't necessarily only mean fasting. It also means to abstain from something. Okay, or it also means to be patient or to mean resilient. So these are various meanings within that one particular word, because in Arabic, to be honest with you, the Arabic language is very dense, very complex. So therefore each word has multiple meanings in association with the grammatical structures within the Arabic language. And therefore, one translation of the Quran does not do justice to the actual meaning of the Arabic language itself. So that's just another pointer to give. So in your textbook, it'll say to you, Sawm refers to fasting in the holy month of Ramadan, if one can, and if one is ill or pregnant or breastfeeding, etc., then those individuals should not fast. Okay. Also in your textbook, you'll find fasting basically refers to going without food or drink or sexual activity from dawn till dusk for 29 or 30 days in the month of Ramadan every year. In Islam, there is an Islamic calendar which goes by the lunar cycle, and therefore the 12 months in Islam, each month is either 29 or 30 days, or some say 30 nights, in relation to the cycle, the lunar cycle. So that is what you will find in the textbook. Okay. In my view, absolutely, but it's much more than that. The idea of fasting isn't necessarily just to stay away from food or drink or sexual activity. The idea of fasting is to discipline one's relationship, one's approach, sorry, not relationship, one's approach towards nourishment. Nourishment not of just food or drink, but nourishment of one's environment, one's surrounding, one's relationship with anything that gives you something. So, for example, when Muslims fast, Muslims are required to abstain from shouting, to abstain from swearing, to abstain from any ill-conceived or any form of environment which can cause negativity to develop within the heart. Therefore, whilst fasting, Muslims, you will see Muslims always in the mosque or reading the Quran or praying or just quite simply going to sleep or being very quiet. Okay, why? Because the idea of fasting is to inculcate a level of modesty to develop within one's human soul. Modesty in what sense? Not in covering up, but modesty in covering your tongue so that your tongue is not polluted by lying, by deceivement, by backbiting, by swearing, etc. Modesty of the eyes, in other words, removing your eyes from those types of environments which can cause you to be nourished through darkness and negativity. So in other words, the idea of fasting isn't to just stay away from food, it's also to stay away from those things which can cause you to develop a sense of disfigurement in terms of your relationship with God through your level of spiritual allegiance as well. And therefore, charity and fasting go hand in hand. You'll see a lot of Muslims, when it comes to fast Ramadan, they become very charitable. And the reason behind that is because according to the Quran and according to Islamic scripture, it states that anyone who feeds another in any capacity, from any background within Ramadan, achieves the highest level in paradise. And paradise is the name given to that sort of period of eternal bliss after once one dies with God. So paradise is really eternal bliss with God once one dies. So in Ramadan, the idea of giving food or drink to people enables Muslims to achieve that from a theological point of view and from a spiritual point of view. Also, in my view, paradise doesn't start from a Muslim perspective. Paradise is not attained once you die. Paradise is attained whilst you are living. Because the idea of paradise, in my view, is when you receive the coolness of your heart or of your human soul in every day and moment of your life, regardless of what goes on in life. When you receive inner contentment, inner peace, that truly is paradise. You know, and the paradise of the afterlife is just an extension of that momentary sort of calmness and coolness that you find within the world. So that's fasting. Okay, and the last but not least, Hajj, pilgrimage. So in your so Hajj basically means intention, or it means movement. It also means motivation. Okay, in the textbook you'll find it states Hajj is the fifth pillar of Islam. It refers to traveling to Mecca and Medina at least once in one's lifetime, when one is able to do so with, you know, financial means and with means of good health as well. That's true. Let me go beyond that. Okay, Hajj isn't necessarily just traveling to Mecca and Medina at least once in one's lifetime to basically visit the Prophet Muhammad's tomb, or even basically God's house in Mecca, or even other places in Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia. No, Hajj, basically, the idea of Hajj from a spiritual point of view within Islam is to indicate that when Muslims they circumambulate around the grand mosque, which is known as the Kaaba in Mecca, when they go for Hajj. The idea of circumambulating and walking around the Kaaba, which is that building that you see with a black sort of cloth on top. Okay, you'll see in the books as well, in a lot of books. Muslims go around that particular building 7 times. And the idea is to basically repetitively remind oneself that one is on their journey towards God, so that when they die, they reunite with God. Okay, so Hajj is more than that, because there are many people who can't go for Hajj. So what does Hajj mean for Muslims in general? The idea of Hajj is to make pilgrimage to God in every single moment of your life. So my heart my heart is a pilgrim to God in every moment of our lives. We all are pilgrim to one another in various ways. We all make journeys towards one another for various reasons. But the greatest journey for a Muslim in life is to be a pilgrim of God. And a pilgrim of God is not restricted only to going to Mecca and Medina. The pilgrim of God happens in every moment in one's life. So that's the true essence of pilgrimage. You know, it's not locational, it's spiritual, it's universal. And that's why within Islam, the human soul is considered transient. It's either colored by the love of God, or it can be diluted by the darkness of forces which can dispel the light of God within one's heart. And that's the essence of the human soul within Islam. So that's the 5 pillars of Islam. But there's one more thing I need to add as well. Muslims believe, and this is in the Quran as well, that before all human creation was created by God, before the creation of the universe and beyond, that which we know and that which we don't know, before anything was created, God created the souls of every single human being that ever was to live on earth. And in that dominion of souls, God decreed who will be with whom in terms of marriage, in terms of, you know, friendship, in terms of family, etc. So when God created Adam, considered the first prophet in Islam, like in other faith traditions, and he bore children, etc., and the progeny of man started, from the dominion of souls, each soul was transferred from that dominion into this world in a biological format. So in other words, that soul was transferred and it entered the human body when it was created in the womb of the mother. And therefore, once a human is born, the idea of free will that God gives that individual to dictate how they want to lead their life begins. So the idea of the human heart and the human soul, let me differentiate between both. The human soul is inspired by God as a form of light which gives inspiration to do good in every moment of one's life. The human heart is the part of the human heart is considered the area in which one is given the free will to do either good or otherwise in accordance with their level of desire in life. So the more one becomes full of humility, the more one associates, from a Muslim perspective, themselves with mosques and the Quran and fasting and charity and you name it, the more of God's light through the human soul enters the human heart and dispels all of the darkness and negativity. The less a Muslim is conscious of God, that light of the human soul starts to diminish, to be replaced by the negativity of life, the negativity of anxiety, the aspect of depression, etc. And therefore it creates a stagnant human soul, not sure how to find its place within the human heart. And this is the battle that I call it the battle between light and darkness within the human heart. And therefore Muslims are advised within Islam to always reflect every day, every night, reflect, what did you do? How did you clean your heart? Where are you going? What's your intentionality? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do tomorrow? How well did you do yesterday? So this repetitiveness of reflection And mindfulness enables Muslims to become better than they already were. And that's why I always say in my book that you were born great only to become greater. And that's the underpinning of the human condition.
That's such an enthusiastic and beautiful explanation. All those different things which connects together so lovely, Raza. That's really nice. I'm really glad we're going to get the book. There's a few things that you've mentioned that I know teachers need to touch on that I'd like you to unpack a little bit for them. So you've talked about Mohammed, you've mentioned Prophet Mohammed. I'd like you to kind of reflect for us a little bit on what that means as an historical person and what that means as a prophet in your life.
Yeah.
And then connected to that, can we have a little chat about the Quran and its
of
nature
course,
and how it's understood?
Absolutely. Just one moment. So in Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is considered to be the culmination of God's chosen messengers to mankind, who include Jesus, Moses, Abraham, etc. Muhammad, according to Islamic scripture, revealed God's universal message to mankind, which is the Quran. So the Quran is a message of hope, a message of peace and spiritual purposefulness. The Quran in Islam is a means of recalibrating the human soul towards God in order to achieve an eternal bliss. And therefore, Islam, in the context of the Quran, is essentially a roadmap for the human soul's journey towards God throughout life and death. Now, Muhammad, one thing I would say is this. In Islam, in the Quran, believe it or not, there are many chapters which describe the nature of Jesus, Moses, Abraham, Joseph, Jacob, etc. In fact, one of the longest chapters in the Quran is called Surah Maryam, which basically refers to a chapter regarding Mary. And in there, it talks about the birth of Jesus. And it talks about Gabriel. And there's another chapter in the Quran. In fact, the prophet whose name is mentioned most in the Quran is Moses. Then Jesus, then Abraham. And Muhammad's name is only mentioned 4 times in the Quran. So the idea of the Quran isn't necessarily just about a new religion or a new spiritual pathway, but the idea of the Quran is to remind adherents of spirituality that don't forget Jesus, don't forget Abraham, don't forget the spiritual pathways of those who came before you, but tie those spiritual pathways with the spiritual pathway of Muhammad and achieve eternal bliss with God. That is what the Quran is about. So the Quran has 114 chapters. And those chapters are either small or big chapters. And each chapter talks about a specific theme, okay? Now, there is one chapter in the Quran, just to give you an example, it's called Surah An-Nahl, which means chapter regarding the bee. Now, you're probably thinking, why would the Quran talk about the bee for, right? But the bee, believe it or not, God states in the Quran that do not underestimate the power and the magnitude of the bee, for it makes honey in different colors for you so that mankind can be cured in various ways. So can you imagine? God is now stating in the Quran, don't underestimate the bee, but appreciate the life of a bee. Appreciate what the bee does for you. Look after bees, you know? I'll tell you another chapter in the Quran. There's a chapter called chapter regarding the cow, okay? So God says in the Quran, be appreciative of God for the gift of cows. Why? Because you use their skin to make clothing. You eat their meat. I mean, for those who are obviously vegetarian, I do apologize for this, but I'm just, or vegan, sorry. But what I'm saying is, the Quran is saying that, you know, you drink its milk, you have its meat, you use its skin. Don't you think these are God's favors upon you, you know? The Quran talks about the 10 Commandments as well. It talks about the Injil, which is known as the Gospel. And it talks about, I mean, I would recommend everyone on this call and beyond, if ever you want a crash course in the Quran throughout its 114 chapters, I am more than willing to do that in a way which would enable you to understand the whole Quran from A to Z in every single way. Because I do think that would be amazing. So that's the Quran. Oh, okay, I'm booked. Gosh, let me just retract that. I'm only kidding. So, so that's the Quran, okay? And I mean, there's so much I could say more, but the Quran itself is just magnificent. I mean, you just got to scratch the surface, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Don't be deluded, not deluded, but don't feel, what's the word? What's a better word of saying it? Don't be dissuaded, not deluded, don't be dissuaded by the fact that it's in the Arabic language. Because the Quran, the reason why it's in the Arabic language, there's a number of reasons. The first reason is because the Quran was revealed to Muhammad, who was an Arab. And his audience primarily were Arabs. So the Quran was revealed in the Arabic language in order to befit the audience of his people. However, the universality of the Quran in terms of its meaning is beyond the Arabic language. And the reason why the Arabic language was chosen is because of its density, its complexities, its grammatical sort of structures, etc. And because the Arabic language being in terms of its diversity and its diversification, because it was so, I mean, you only have to scratch the surface in terms of understanding Arabs and the language, and you'll understand what I'm talking about, how complex and how diverse it is in every single way. You can therefore appreciate the Quran, that though it's in Arabic, it's actually, believe it or not, you know how people say Queen's English, or they say, what was it? You know, thou and they, and I forgot what the term was.
King James version of the Bible with the these and the thous.
Yes, okay. So the Quranic Arabic is considered the most proficient and the highest level of Arabic, even by Arabs nowadays. Because the Arab nowadays don't actually speak the Arabic of the Quran. They speak their own sort of slang, you know, like Geordie and Cockney, etc. They speak that. So when I go to Arab countries, believe it or not, and I'm a Bangladeshi origin, when Arabs hear me speak in the language of the Quran, they get shocked. They say, "Are you Arab?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just from Bangladesh." They say, "Oh my God, you speak like this and you speak like that." And I said, "Look, you know, it's just the way I learned, because I memorized the whole Quran by heart by the age of 18, and that was no mean feat. I mean, I'll tell you one thing, that was difficult. but to memorize the language is one thing. To memorize the whole Quran is another thing altogether, and that's a big responsibility as well. So that's the Quran. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, was born in 571 AD, and he was born as an orphan. So his father passed away before he was born. His mother died when he was 6. So really, before the age of 8, he had no mother or father. And in that particular moment of his life, he was catered for by his uncles, by his grandparents, etc. He became a prophet at the age of 40, and he died at the age of 63. So from the time he became a prophet, when I say became a prophet, what I mean by that is the first form of divine revelation of the Quran began with him from the age of 40, and he died at the age of 63. Now, one thing I would say is he wasn't an Arab prophet. He was a universal prophet. And I tell you why, because the Quran states that, "Oh Muhammad, we sent you as a mercy unto mankind." But what that meant was he had several responsibilities. It wasn't just to cater for Muslims. We had responsibilities to cater for people in general, for animals, for produce, etc. And if you just scratch the surface in terms of the sayings of Muhammad, you'll come to realize that he was quite universal in what he said. Let me give you some examples. He said, one statement is, "Love for humanity that which you love for yourself." And also, once in Medina, where he resided, there was a Jewish funeral procession taking place. He stood up, and out of silence, he bowed his head. And his people around him said, "Why are you standing up for a funeral, a Jewish funeral procession? They're not Muslim." And then he said, "Is he not human?" And what that basically means is his attitude towards people was of a universal background. And therefore, when he moved from Mecca to Medina, I don't know if anyone's ever come across this or not, but they had something called the Madian or the Medina Charter. Has anyone ever heard of that before or not? The Medina Charter? Normally, if you look in textbooks and bookshops, they'll only tell you there was 14 sort of rules that was agreed between the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, and many other people. What I found out in 2018 was an old manuscript which numbered more than 62 points of agreement between Muhammad, Muslims, and the Jews and the Christians. And it wasn't all fixated on religious identity and religious harmony. It talked about produce, business, transactions, that there was a rule there, which was anyone who attacks Medina, we all combine forces to protect Medina as one community. So there was agreements like that in place in order to ensure that the idea of nationhood, statehood, wasn't applied only to one section of the community, but was applied to all. And that's a great example of citizenship. I mean, if you look at citizenship nowadays in the British context, and you look at citizenship in the context of Medina in that period, you know, you can look at it and think, all right, that's interesting that those things had happened as well. So Muhammad, he was a man full of valor, honor, integrity, and you know, he always spoke about Jesus as his brother. In fact, there's a belief in Islam which states that near the end of time, Jesus would return again. And I'm sure in the Christian tradition that there's an understanding in some way or form of that. In the Jewish tradition, I don't know what the term is it Antichrist? I can't remember what it was, or something. They say something about near the end of time. I can't remember correctly, but within the Muslim tradition, in the Quran, it states that Jesus will return. When he returns, he'll bring peace to the whole world. He'll bring peace amongst communities, and when he dies, he'll be buried next to the Prophet Muhammad in Medina. So that's an understanding that we have within Islam in relation to Jesus. So Jesus is as sanctified as Muhammad and Moses and all the other prophets in Islam, as much as Mary and many other people. In fact, Mary is considered in the Quran as the greatest woman who ever lived in the whole of humanity.
It is important to distinguish the difference in Muslim belief about Jesus' death, though, from Christian belief, isn't it?
Absolutely,
So
yes.
Just want to clarify that for the teachers
So
present.
Muslims, yeah. So the Quran states that Jesus was not killed on the cross, and that another person who betrayed Jesus and his disciples was instead crucified instead of Jesus. In other words, that God, due to the treachery of this individual, God made his face similar to that of Jesus, and therefore he was captured, this individual was captured, and he was crucified on the cross, and Jesus was raised up to heavens by the angel Gabriel.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So for Muslims who revere Jesus, the idea that Jesus was God who was killed is anathema. That's just not on. So that's just a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And we believe also Jesus to be a servant to God, a prophet of God. There isn't any belief in Islam in relation to the idea of Jesus being omnipresent or godlike. You know?
Yeah, because in Islam, God is one. There is, in Christianity, God is one, but there is no sense of Trinity or Holy Spirit. God is God and God is all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess interpretations can vary, and therefore people may have different views on different things as well. Like in some parts of Islam, there are some Muslims who believe that certain saints hold the same value as God, and that normally would be rejected by Orthodox Muslims in that regard as well.
Yeah, the diversification within the sects, and I think Islam is happy if they're called sects. It doesn't have the same negative effect as it does in English. It's quite large in how they react to people.
Oh yeah. In fact, if you look at Arabic scripture, which talks about these ideas, the word sect, in fact, the Arabic word that is used, believe it or not, is called madhab. And basically, madhab means methodology. So they use the term methodology in relation to these various schools of thought, as they call them. However, there are particular groups that do term themselves as Muslims, but their views may not necessarily be in conjunction with the Quran. So for example, the Quran states that Muhammad is the last prophet of God, the culmination of God's messengers. And there are some who consider themselves as Muslims who believe, no, there is a continuation of prophethood up until the return of Jesus. And in their view, Jesus is the last God and not Muhammad. And they claim themselves as Muslims. So obviously you have various debates around that.
Which are too deep to go into right now, but they're important to acknowledge that there's diversity.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Raza, could you just clarify for teachers some of the stories that teachers are asked to teach about Muhammad, or some of the traditions about Muhammad, don't actually come from the Quran, they come from the Hadith.
Yes.
So
yes.
would you mind just clarifying for teachers kind of the source of these stories?
So the Quran is considered the divine message of God revealed to Muhammad over a period of 23 years through the angel Gabriel. Okay, so that's what the Quran is. So it's really considered that every word of the Quran is considered a message of God. So not man-made, it's directly from God to Muhammad, written by the scribes who were present around Muhammad at the time of divine revelation. Okay, once Muhammad passed away, there were rumors about what he said and what he didn't say. And in order to clarify that, the Muhammad's followers, they thought we need to devise a particular science to scrutinize what is true and what is not true in relation to what Muhammad said or did, what he didn't do. And therefore the science of hadith, which basically means narration. So the science of Muhammad's narratives began pretty much 3 decades after his passing away. And ever since then, this science has grew enormously. There have been books written about hadith which are acceptable, and books which have been written about hadith which are fabricated and not acceptable. So that's basically the hadith. So there are 2 sources of information. You have the Quran, the primary source, and then you have the hadith, which some may consider primary and some may consider a secondary source. Okay, so these 2 sources are the bedrock in terms of the informative aspect of Islam, in terms of practice, theology, understanding, attitudes, etc.
That's really helpful. So I've got a couple of practical questions now, because our teachers are very quiet. Teachers, if you've got any questions, I did warn Raza that you might be quiet. If a couple of practical things. If a teacher has a Quran in the classroom, or if they borrow a Quran from us, how would you like to see it treated in the classroom? How would you like it to be introduced to the children?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Qurans normally are put into like on a table or in a higher position or in a place where feet are not put on, So I would advise, if you do have Quran, then maybe put onto a higher place or put onto a place where other books are stacked up or something like that, There are some who may say, put the Quran on top of the pile, but there's no rule to say that you can't do that. It's just a matter of preference anyway. So I would advise that whether the Quran is totally in English as a translation, or whether it's in Arabic or half Arabic or anything like that, please try and put the Quran at the top if you can. The Quran, if you do approach kids in class in terms of the Quran and you want to talk about it, just say, I would say, this is what I would do, that the book I have in my hand is called the Quran. And the Quran basically is quite similar to the Bible and to the Torah and to the Talmud, etc., in which it describes what to do and what not to do in Islam, and it talks about stories and it talks about how to become a better human being. That's what I would say in trying to introduce the Quran to people. So it's like any other book, but the difference is this book focuses on how to become better as a human being through spirituality in Islam.
And also, it's really of value to people. So how would you treat anything of value? If you got year 5s and they've got a favourite toy, you wouldn't point it across the classroom. So it's about transmitting that value. We've got an interesting question from Chris, which I've got an answer to, but you're the guest, so you can answer it. Here we go. With younger children, would you teach them about Islam as a comparison with what they already know about Christianity? Or does it need to be treated respectfully on its own? Or
Good
is there a
question.
third way? Or is there a third way?
Well, you know, with me, there's always a third way when it comes to me. Right. So I would do both, really. I would say this is Islam, but the link between Islam and Christianity is through the succession of prophets. So what you see about Jesus in Christianity, you will see also within Islam. And that's sure to intrigue children in terms of, oh, really? Oh, we thought it was all separate or something. And then you can basically blend in the variations of similarities that there are between Islam and Christianity in the context of Jesus. I always say Jesus, I mean, peace and blessings be upon him, is absolutely the anchor between Islam and Christianity in terms of understanding not just the comparisons, but also their differences as well, as we've explored before.
That answers the question, Chris. I know that you can't actually talk to us, so do chuck it in the chat if you want more depth on that. What I would like Raza to do is just explain the use of peace and blessings be upon him after you talk about prophets,
Yes.
and why teachers don't need to say it, but Muslims will.
Yeah. So so peace and blessings be upon him or her, okay, is normally a form of reverence given to prophets. And the reason behind that is because you know how you have the Queen and you say, Your Royal Highness, Your Majesty, etc. So similarly, when it comes to prophets, we hold a form of reverence by saying peace and blessings be upon him or them, etc. But that doesn't mean to say we have to say it all the time. As you may have come across today's session, I haven't said peace and blessings after Muhammad all the time, okay? You can say it just once. Muslims are only required to say it once in a conversation. They don't have to say it all the time. There are some Muslims who will say it all the time. And the peace and blessings be upon him is not restricted to Muhammad. It's also for Jesus, Moses, etc. In fact, even Mary, peace and blessings be upon her, because according to some Muslim scholars, they believe that even Mary was a prophet because she had direct contact with God before the birth of Jesus.
That's really helpful. Lovely. Thank you. Raza, you and I have had conversations previously around mental health and spirits and other things. It's not so much important for, oh, sorry, one second. Karenza, are we back to links between faiths and showing those comparisons, similarities and differences as a supportive aid for staff? Yeah, I think we are, Rob. Rob and I have had conversations previously how we help teachers make connections and distinctions between traditions. That's one of them. Just to go back to this question I was going to ask you, it sometimes features for Muslim children. There aren't a huge amount of Muslim children in North Tyneside, I don't think, but it certainly appears in conversations around the practice and the ritual of Salah with good angels and bad angels. And it certainly happens much larger in secondary school Islam about the angelic realm. Could you tell us a bit about the angelic realm and how that might be understood by teachers so they can support children with that?
Yeah, so, you know, angels, and there's a whole chapter regarding angels in the Quran. And it describes angels as being winged beings who have no free will, but do as God states in terms of his commands throughout the universe. Angels in Islam are considered a representation of God's closeness, love, and compassion to all human beings, regardless of whether you're Muslim or not. Therefore, angels are considered a form of consideration and support for those who have anxiety or for those who feel lonely. Hence, in Islam, the idea of having an angel on your right and on your left is to provide you with solace in times of anxiety and loneliness as well. There are various angels. Some angels have 2 wings, some have 1, some have 3, some have 360 according to the Quran. Some angels are as large as the east and the west. Some are as minute as babies. Some are really small. Some are transient. Some are in the high heavens. In Islam, the angels of the heaven exchange positions with the angels of the earth between every dawn and dusk. Okay. And the idea, believe it or not, this is interesting. The idea is that the angels of the heaven, they envy the angels of the earth when the angels of the earth roam around the world and they see that people are remembering God. So when they exchange positions, it gives an opportunity to the angels of the heaven to embrace the blessings of the humans of earth who embrace God on earth. And therefore, the angels of the earth, they go up to the high heavens to say to God, God, such and such was blessing your name, such and such did things in your name. Please honor them. And God honors the lives of those who embrace him.
I hadn't heard that before. Is that hadith or is that Quran?
Yes, that's a hadith and in the Quran as well. Yeah.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that. That's lovely. That's really beautiful. I don't think a lot of our teachers will know that most of the understanding of angels that they have in the secular world or in films comes from Islam and not from any other tradition. There are very few angels in the Bible at all. It's them, they're mainly Muslim tradition, and the world adopted them as standard. It's awesome.
Yeah. Angels are neither male or female. They quite simply, and they don't have a halo on their head, as some people might say. I mean, they don't have a halo. Angels are made out of spiritual light, and therefore, sometimes angels can provide inspiration for people in order to be motivated in the various aspects of their life. So sometimes an angel may usher someone to do something great, and sometimes an angel may participate alongside someone in their level of greatness within life. You know that feeling that people say, I feel like I'm floating, I feel like I'm flying, I feel like this and that. That's the wings of the angels who carry that motivation for that individual in the greatness of their life.
That is absolutely lovely. I don't know if Jen wants to say anything about an observation she's made about the similarities and differences in themes. And if you want to say something, then please do pop in. And Emma's saying that she's finding bits interesting here that she didn't know at all. So our teachers are still with us. They're not off having their tea. I know they're not. They're always like this. They're very good. If you were going to describe the most important rite of passage that a Muslim might go through, and I think baby naming is something that appears on the syllabus for some of our teachers, what do you think would be the most important one? Because they're quite often secular in Islam, aren't they, rather than religious? Is that right? In terms of marriage and things? Yeah.
Are you talking about rites of passage in terms of ceremonies and occasions?
Yeah, yeah.
There's quite a few, actually. Marriage is obviously a biggie. I mean, soon as a child becomes an adult and they hit the age of 18 or 20, everyone starts asking, oh, when are you getting married next, etc. You know, you're probably thinking, why marriage? Why can't you just date? Why can't you just do whatever, you know? I think the sanctity of marriage within Islam isn't necessarily based on it's not based on just having a relationship. The idea of marriage within Islam, which is a big thing, by the way, the idea of marriage in Islam is for the couples to enhance each other's path towards God, so that the bridge to hereafter is fortified through their love and compassion with each other. That's what marriage is basically in Islam. Therefore, people are married for various reasons. So the Prophet Muhammad said, people are married either for their looks, for their wealth, for their family status, and for their personality. And he said, choose the one with great personality, because all others will dither and they'll go away. But one's a golden heart will never seize any of its riches in life.
That's really beautiful. That's lovely. Have you got a favorite story about Mohammed that you want to share with us?
I mean, I shared the one about the Jewish funeral procession, which really underpins my sort of way I look at life and whatnot. There's so many. Yeah, I'll tell you. Yeah, I'll tell you a story actually. So when Muhammad was 35 or 36, and the rebuilding of the Kaaba, which is that sort of building with the black cloth draped over it that you see on many pictures when it comes to Mecca. So when the rebuilding of the Kaaba was taking place, next to the Kaaba, there's a stone you may have read in the books called the Black Stone. Okay. Originally, that stone was not black according to Islamic scripture. That stone was delivered by God through angel Gabriel to Adam, the first prophet of God, when he was building the house of God on earth. So the building was made, and God said to Gabriel, take this white stone, emerald stone, to earth and give it to Adam and tell him to place it alongside my house. Why? For every person who circumambulates around the Kaaba, that's the name given to this building, and they kiss this stone with their lips, or just make eye contact with him or anything like that, that all of their sins are forgiven and they are emancipated from any negativity, and they are blessed in their life. Throughout centuries, this stone turned black. And scholars say, Muslim scholars say, it turned dark or black due to the sins of mankind. And therefore, it's considered as the black stone. Now, when the rebuilding of the Kaaba was taking place at the time when Muhammad was 35, everyone wanted, all the tribes in Mecca wanted the honor of their tribe to lift up the black stone and to put it next to the Kaaba. And people are arguing, though, you know, there was a lot of arguments and pushing and shoving. So Muhammad said, look, I have an idea. So they said, yes, Muhammad, what do you say? What do you say? At that time, Muhammad was considered the trustworthy one because he was considered someone in his community who never lied, was always quiet, and always wanted to do things for people. So they said, what do you propose, Muhammad? So he said, look, whoever walks through the gates of this mosque first thing tomorrow morning will have the keys to the Kaaba, but also will be in charge of deciding how to rid this particular contest in relation to the placement of the black stone. So everybody agreed to that. They said, yeah, Muhammad, you know, you're a good guy, you know, you're charitable and whatnot, fine. The next morning, before anyone woke up, Muhammad entered through the gates. And as he entered through the gates, people knew, oh, well, I mean, we're not going to disagree with Muhammad, are we really? So he then said, I have an idea. So they said, yes, what do you suggest? He said, get a large piece of cloth. And so they got a large piece of cloth. He himself got the black stone and placed it right in the middle of the cloth or the blanket. And he said to every single leader of every single tribe in Mecca, put your hand on the cloth and grab it. So every single leader in Mecca got hold of the cloth, and he said to all of them, now lift the blanket. As they lifted it, he said, now go next to the Kaaba and place the black stone next to the Kaaba. So by doing that, everyone had a part to play in the honorific positioning of the black stone next to the Kaaba. And in that way, he unified the tribes of Arabia in relation to the positioning of the black stone. And that, to me, shows a lot about his humanity, his selflessness, and his innovative way of thinking in terms of community cohesion and development as well.
I have never heard that story, and I'm about to hand over to Rob because our session has come to an end.
Okay.
And Rob is a PE specialist. We also have several parachutes at work. So if our teachers would like to have a go with a parachute to you know, a big fabric circle of cloth and a football, if they want to have a go at reenacting a problem-solving activity around this exercise to discuss what kind of man Mohammed might have been, I think that might be a really fun thing to do. Raza, I need to say a massive thank you to you for everything that you've shared, everything you've given us. I will hand over to Rob to say goodbye, but you never let me down. You are such a wonderful person to spend time with. I really enjoy every moment we spend together. Rob,
thank you for having me. Thank you.